And we're back on another exciting episode of Starfleet So Hail, where we have a casual and informal conversation about Star Trek. Today we're focused on Star Trek Strange New Worlds, episode 5, season 2, episode 5, Charades. And I'm so excited to have my friend Robbie back. Hello, Robbie.
Hiya.
How you doing?
Good. Glad to be on this discussion with some fellow Trekkies.
Thank you. And we have our longtime listener or viewer, first time panelist, I think. And it's Dan. I like that
Hi.
your Dan in Tennessee
Right.
is your handle. I just noticed that.
Yes. Well, I am in Tennessee, and I am Dan, so I thought that would be easy for people. Um, it's great to be here. I'm really honored to be a guest on your show. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for coming on. We really appreciate it. Just real quick, when we have new folks on, we like to hear their kind of Star Trek story. But before we get to that, actually, I've come up with an impromptu question, which is,
Oh,
are you anywhere near Chattanooga?
yeah, I'm about 2 hours away from Chattanooga. With traffic,
Okay.
it's like 2.5 hours. I go down to Chattanooga every month or so for work. Do you go to Chattanooga?
No, so I've never been to Tennessee, but like I've always
Oh,
wanted to go to Chattanooga and see the. Is it
yeah.
true? It's there, like the Chattanooga Choo Choo. Like,
Yes.
is that like
It's
a thing?
actually
Yeah.
it's a hotel, and you can like stay in the cars of the
Oh,
hotel.
really? No
Yeah,
way.
which I've done before.
Pardon me, boys. Is that the Chattanooga Choo Choo? Hey,
Yes.
I love that song. It's so
That's
cool.
yes. Chattanooga is a good place. They've got like an amazing downtown, amazing aquarium down there, and yeah, it's just a really groovy town. You'd like it.
Thank you. I will let you know when I come to visit finally. I had
Mhm.
family living in Tennessee for a while. I don't think it was, where was it? I forget where. It wasn't, it was like a small town somewhere, but I think they were also like near Chattanooga, but they moved
Mhm.
away from Tennessee before I got to visit them.
Oh,
Uh, so alas, I've not yet been, but are there
well,
any like Star Trek specific or comic book conventions in Tennessee that are of note that like a lot of people come in from out of town for?
yeah. Well, there's a comic book convention in Memphis once a year. We have something in Knoxville called Fanboy, and Fanboy's in July, and it's like kind of a small thing. This year, it was the same time as Shore Leave, and I drove up to Shore Leave in
Oh,
Maryland,
okay.
so I kind of missed it. But
Very
yeah,
cool.
we have a few things like that. Yeah.
That's cool. Oh, Memphis, that's where isn't that where Graceland is?
That's absolutely
No.
right.
Oh, it
It
is.
is.
I was right.
Yeah,
Okay.
it is in Memphis.
I know my country a little
Yeah,
bit.
you do. Yeah, yeah.
Robbie's probably like, this is so boring. What are they talking about?
No,
What
I
is
just don't. It's
Graceland?
not boring. I just don't know any of it.
Well, do you know who Elvis is, Robbie?
Yeah, I know Elvis.
So Graceland is his childhood home, if I'm, or no,
Mhm.
maybe not his childhood home. It was not where he
Oh,
grew
it's
up,
not
is
his
it?
well, he grew up in Memphis. It's not his childhood home, but it's his
Oh,
home that
okay.
he had when he
Right.
became, super rich.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I guess it's now I believe all of them passed away just like recently. Like
Yeah.
yeah, so now it's a anyways, that's we're
Anyway,
totally off track here.
right, right.
That was our Tennessee curiosity
Yes,
moment. Now we'll
yes.
go to Dan. Tell us a little bit about
Okay.
your Star Trek story and how you came to Star Trek and what do you enjoy about it the most?
Okay, so I'm a child of the '80s. Used to watch TOS on reruns, obviously. Loved the movies. Um, and I started watching Next Gen in 1987. And I watched Next Gen off and on. I mean, I watched all the Monster Marine movies, or Monster Maroon movies, excuse me, in the theater. I watched Next Gen off and on. I can't say that I really followed it as fanatically as a lot of other people. Um, when it came on, I guess I was just getting really busy with life and school and spending time with friends outside of school. And I did not make that a priority. I liked the show. I did not make that a priority. I completely missed DS9. Like I just was completely out of it. Had a college roommate that we watched Voyager. But Star Trek was just kind of, yeah, it's cool. I like Star Trek. There was the show that I always wanted to watch, which was Deep Space Nine. But like these DVDs were like so expensive, and you could get some TV shows from the
They
library, but
were they were
they
super
were so,
expensive. Like
but right, and
that's
you could
true. I
get these shows
remember.
right. And it's like you're going to buy a show that you kind of don't even know about. So you could get this show from the library. You could get shows from the library, but DS9 was not one of those shows. So I had this out there of I always want to watch this show, but I don't really know about it. And in 2015, I don't know whether you remember this, but all of the Star Treks were available on Amazon Prime. All right, this is a little bit of a boring story, but stay with me. So in 2015, I watched DS9, and it was like, my mind was blown. And yeah, I mean, the rest is history. I went back and I watched Enterprise. I went back and I watched all of Next Gen, and I mean, that whole Berman era, I'm really excited about. And yeah, and
So,
I liked
were you
Enterprise.
digging Picard then? Because I
Oh
feel like
yeah.
it was,
Oh,
yeah, okay,
absolutely,
cool.
absolutely. When Discovery came out, I mean, I was just blown away. I watched every minute of it. Like you were talking about CBS All Access earlier. I mean, I got CBS All Access. I was one of those people that made CBS All Access huge. I watched, the episodes at 7 a.m. on a Thursday. I'm Eastern time, by the way. And it's
I
like
remember doing that too.
I would rewatch these episodes and get so excited about it. And here I am. Like I like all the new stuff. Really looking forward to Lower Decks. Really like Strange New Worlds. I can't wait to get into that, to talk to people about that. And yeah, so last year I went to STLV, which I'm not going to be able to do that this year. But wow, I mean, it was just a really great experience, and I love the shows. And I'm also kind of a book addict, so I read the novels, and I'm into all that stuff.
We have that
Yeah.
in common. I've been trying
Yeah,
to
Robbie reads the
go through
books.
some of
Okay.
the books.
Oh man.
Wait, what are some of the books you've read?
Well, I've read a lot of David Mack's books. I've read a lot of Dayton Ward's books. I've read my favorite novel is The Buried Age by Christopher L. Bennett. Love that book.
Oh, I started that one.
Yeah, it's
No,
great.
wait. I think it was a different one.
Okay.
I, I've been enjoying Spock's World, Diane
Yes,
Duane stuff.
that's a great one. That's a great
Um,
one.
some of the DS9 novels
Yeah.
from what's her name?
Una McCormick.
Yeah, Una.
Yes, yes.
Is she the one who wrote Cisco's? No, she didn't
No,
do Cisco. She's done Kirk, Janeway, right?
she's done Janeway, and I don't I don't know if she did
Well,
did one of the
I
next.
started reading the Enigma Tales, which is really good, and
Yeah,
that's by her. So
yeah,
I
yeah,
haven't finished it, but I will finish it. I
yeah.
promise.
Well, and she's written two Picard novels, and this last one called Second Self, and it's just unbelievable, unbelievable.
She's also really cool on Twitter. She's very active on Twitter.
Yes,
and
that's right.
she's really
That's right.
cool. Yeah.
Yeah. So here I am.
So is Dayton Ward. He's funny.
Yes,
I
he's
like
got
him.
a lot of great stuff, and his blog. He
I like
posts.
his tweets so much.
That's right. Yep.
But very cool. So like, yeah, you're like into all Star Trek. It sounds like
Yeah.
you're like
Oh yeah.
you're up to date as far as the complete lore. It sounds like you're a
Mhm.
completionist. You've got me beat. I still haven't completed Voyager, but I'm on my way.
Oh no, I haven't. I
Oh
haven't
yeah.
completed.
Oh,
I haven't completed Voyager. I've completed TNG. I've completed Enterprise. There's a lot of Voyager that I still haven't watched.
oh,
But I
okay.
will
We're on
say,
the same.
yeah. But there's a lot of Voyager that's great, and I don't want to say, oh, I don't like Voyager. Like, I think it's a great show. I just haven't completed it yet. So
Well, I'm glad you've kind of gotten your Starfleet Sohail feet wet, as it were, using sailing metaphors. Because after we finish right now, so Strange New Worlds is preempting our normal kind of like series where I'm watching, kind of like doing rewatch of series. And so after that, after Strange New Worlds, if there's a little break between this and Lower Decks, which I think there will be, we're going to continue with the animated series, finish that up, and then we're starting Deep Space Nine. So that's going to be months away. But when we start Deep Space Nine, you're totally, you're always welcome to come on a discussion. Once you've come on, as long as you behave yourself, you're always welcome to come on a discussion.
Great.
And so yeah, but especially then when we do DS9, I know Robbie's excited about it. I think Father might even be coming on those because he's like so excited about it. So yeah, it's doing very cool. We have our own channel, so we try not to overlap too much. but we're also friends. We like to talk about Star Trek, so it's pretty cool. Well, that's great.
All right.
Before we get into talking about this episode, I just want to note that here on the Starfleet Sohail channel, as Starfleet Sohail, I support the actors and writers who are on strike right now. And so I would just like to send a if anyone is listening, if Bob Iger or anyone in the industry happened to see a clip of this, I would just like to say that, like, I think this is like a really good opportunity for you to find your humanity and express it, much like we get in this episode that's coming up, because you're creating a lot of bad will. In fact, I don't expect anyone else to do this, but after tonight, I plan to cancel my Paramount Plus membership, Disney Plus, like all the superfluous kind of streaming services that I pay for, because I could just wait and get these things on physical media. And if they don't come out on physical media, there's other ways, like I can go to, like, the underground market and pick up the digital copy or whatever, and I'll do it. I'll pirate. I'll turn into an Orion. Dang it. No, but anyways, I'm gonna do that until, all joking aside, until a contract is reached, which I can't imagine what it's like to strike when you're, one thing that was like kind of pointed out, which I already felt strongly about, but most of the people in show business are kind of, they're not like making enough money where you would think, you think of like actors, you think of glamour, because we think of like the superstars on the red carpet, and like they travel on the circuit, but there's so many actors that support um all of our beloved shows that we love to watch, that don't really make enough money to do it, but they do it because they love it. They're performers. That's their craft. That's their art. That's how they express themselves. And so most of the time they're like, juggling like insane schedules to make it, to make this work. And all they're asking for is like a fairer wage. And the the studios want to like have their likeness forever to use as they wish, because they're trying to get rid of extras and all these they're like trying to use, it's horrifying when you hear like, I saw the press conference, that and Fran Drescher is not exaggerating. Like, I'm a supporter of technology as a tool to like improve you know the working conditions and things like that of humanity. I think like also it'll help us like kind of do things faster and like get from point A to point B faster. But just like in any tool, it's sad to see that like these billionaires, basically, that run these corporations, think it's just okay to use it as a way to like basically uh cut out a bunch of people from an art form, like something that they love to do, that like should always be considered an art form. I don't know, it's really terrible
Well,
when
the
you really start to
billionaires
think about
the
it.
billionaires are so removed, and actors don't have a steady job. At least our Star Trek actors have, not to say that they're not struggling, but at least they have conventions, which keep them
Yeah, and I hope,
going. But a lot of actors,
yeah.
they have one hit and then they're struggling for parts afterwards. Unless you're in a long running TV show, or you're a movie star, you've not really got a steady line of work.
Yeah, it's true. I think it's like a great time, by the way, if there's like someone who's like an extra. I always point out extras in Star Trek, or like like background characters. I usually make them my husband, but but I think you're on mute, Dan. But we don't hear you anymore. Oh no, we lost Dan.
No?
Hello. Oh, yeah.
You can hear me now?
Yes, there we go.
Great.
Communications reestablished. Remediation has been has been made.
Yeah,
All
when
right.
Can you hear me now?
So, anyways, we could talk about this forever, and certainly, I think it's important to get the conversation going. What I've been doing is like really reading what actors that I follow, which are 90% actors in Star Trek, admittedly, but I've been reading what they have to say about it and retweeting them. So if you have like a little bit of a platform, I hope you'll do the same thing and share what's going on, so that like there can be more attention to what's going on, and what's maybe the corporations will feel a little bit of a pinch if enough people are putting attention on this, where it gets into the news and stuff like that. And they're as the bad will grows and people unsubscribe, that they'll come to a quicker negotiation and not try to starve out actors and make them lose their homes, as was suggested by some of the people running these negotiations on that side. Anyways, I'm angry. Can you tell I'm angry? All
Yeah,
right.
I can. Well, I can. Can you hear me okay, Sohail?
Yeah, we can hear you. You're good. You're coming in good. All right, so let's get into this episode. I'll open with kind of just like to say that one of the things that I really love about Star Trek in general is that even episodes that like we see this time and time again, there's like even episodes that maybe you don't remember them when you're like like when you're thinking about your favorite episodes, like maybe this was an episode that you liked but you didn't remember, but even that has like some value and like sparks up conversations. And so this episode, surprisingly, I thought is going to be one of those episodes. Like I loved it. I thought it was hilarious, but I thought, oh, a lot of people aren't into like the humor in Star Trek necessarily or the love. And so I was like, oh yeah, this is an episode that's going to get like a lot of, negative attention from the majority of like, Star Trek fans, I would say. But for me it was just hilarious, delightful the whole way through. And I think what I find really cool about this episode is that like there's a lot of conversation going on online around this episode, and it's like really interesting to hear like different perspectives from folks who identify with Spock from a multiracial perspective to people who think like uh people who are like, oh, this is not like what Spock is like at all. It's like forgetting
Or
that he's
even
like, all
even
there's just a
people's
lot of
social difficulties, seeing him
yeah.
kind of struggle through that without the kind of Vulcan way to kind of help him.
Right. So like, yeah, so here seeing all these discussions made me like this episode even more, because I'm like, that's kind of like what I always love about Star Trek, is that it evokes like a response, from the audience. And this episode is very evocative. So yeah, I'm really excited to talk about it with you guys. Uh Dan, why don't you go ahead and give some opening thoughts next, and then Robbie, round us off with your opening thoughts.
Okay, so just opening thoughts. Just not to get too complex into the substance of the episode. I just want to say one thing that really jumps out at me when I watch this episode is the facial expressions of Ethan Peck and Jess Bush in this episode. It's so brilliant. You're talking earlier about these people being artists. It really is an art. It's not just about, reading lines. And it was
Right.
so great to see when Spock becomes fully human. I mean, just the range of facial expressions that we see from that guy. And it also makes you realize when he's playing a full Vulcan, what he has to do. So in this episode, he's a Vulcan playing a human. It's like he's a Vulcan who becomes a human. Some of his mannerisms and the way he speaks is still Spock, still like Vulcan Spock, but he's become fully human. And he's like dealing with all these things, and a lot of his facial expressions, particularly when he's with T'Pring's family, and just kind of these real subtle things. Or he's talking to his mother at the transporter room. It's just amazing. But then if you watch Jess Bush and the Nurse Chapel character, it's like there's the same kind of just really brilliance with the acting. And so that's the first thing. I mean, I have so many other things. I took notes too, but
Good,
but
good.
but I mean, the acting in this is just brilliant. That's my first thought.
I thought this episode, although it was kind of funny, I like that it had an emotional kind of infusion. You still had the relatability factor with Spock and Amanda. I would have liked some more of the Amanda Spock dynamic, maybe explore that more. But what we got, finding out that she was kind of shunned by Vulcan mothers, and Spock realizing uh, what she went through by going through his own struggle, was really nice. Um, and what Dan was saying about the acting was also, yeah, brilliant, because Nurse Chapel, she's got this sadness in her eyes and this struggle. And Spock is such a contrast, because he's got the energy of a 5-year-old in this episode, and he's so upbeat, and then he goes through, hunger, ups and downs. So I feel like it started off 99% of it was really funny, and I like that it ended on a very human note.
Very cool. And I totally forgot to do the episode summary, so I'll just do it in the form of questions. In the beginning, did you guys notice that the um, the log was started by Chapel, and like Star Trek Strange New World seems to have like this kind of like regular thing they do, that whoever like has the first log in the episode is like who the episode is going to be focused on. But this episode also like not too long after brought Spock in with a log entry as well,
Yeah.
and it felt just as like strong, like and I did feel that, like, I don't know how you guys felt, and I'd like to know, like, for me it felt like it was a nice balance between the two of the characters. Like they
Mhm.
really, and somehow they managed to bring in T'Pring and put emphasis on her. It was really well crafted, I thought,
Yeah.
in that way.
Yeah, and I mean, I just want to pick up from that. It would be easy to make T'Pring into a really one-sided kind of villain, the bad girlfriend that Spock wants to get rid of, and she's just
Right, which is what
kind of
she's been
yeah,
before Strange New Worlds. Like in
sure.
TOS, I totally was like, "Oh,
Yeah.
T'Pring," like
Yeah,
whatever.
exactly. I mean, it would. I think it'd be easier. Yeah, I think it'd be easy to show T'Pring as like an albatross that is just a terrible dead weight. And I think they've done a really good job of showing that Spock is truly torn. And when he says something in the end of like, "I have feelings. I'm confused." I mean, it is confusion. He feels something for both of these women. I'm sad that T'Pring so far we're only getting T'Pring in like these comedic episodes. It would be awesome to see T'Pring in more serious episodes, but that's a minor gripe. I think
we're headed in that direction, so we got to
yeah,
enjoy the lightness
yeah,
before
you're probably right.
Cybok. I
Yeah.
think
Oh
Cybok's
yeah.
gonna tear shit up. He's gonna tear shit up. I have a feeling it's true.
Yeah. Right.
Any thoughts on that, Robbie?
Um, I feel like I'm kind of conflicted because I'm really enjoying this season. You know, it's really a nitpick. I feel like this show in general, is kind of it's mostly comedy, which is fine. And I realize that it came out of fans wanting a lighter tone, and it's kind of trying to go for a TOS tone, and TOS was often very silly. But I feel like the show sometimes needs to kind of focus less on Spock now. I mean, we still need to get these episodes that are obviously leading up to the to Pring stuff so that it makes sense. But I feel like it's mostly Spock Pike this show, and I feel like this episode I really enjoyed it. I loved it, you know, but it could have had more of a focus on even Amanda so that it wasn't as much um on Chapel so that we'd kind of flesh out more of the Amanda stuff and that would still relate to TOS. Um, I feel like the show needs to maybe focus on other characters like Mabenga or Ahura more. It's difficult because it is a 10 episode season. But I'm hoping the latter half of the season focuses a little less on Spock, even though this stuff was brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, it's so hard. I mean, you brought it up in your statement there, but that's the thing that's kind of frustrating overall, is that, like, you start to see these characters that you really like. Like I really loved Hammer, and then they killed Hammer, but now I love Carol Kane, and now I'm like, where's Carol Kane? She's
Yeah.
never in the episode. And like,
Right.
definitely one of the things that was disappointing, but it wasn't their fault. Like, my understanding is that she hadn't been cast yet at this point, so they actually like put that line in later on or whatever. But like, it would have been cool if like they could have, like, I get it, it's budgets and everything, like, but yeah, I definitely longed for Carol Kane because she's a hit for me anyways, like,
Yeah.
and I'm like, oh man, they should definitely have more of her. uh just as a side question, like, now I'm like, I was kind of excited when Hammer dies, I guess, died. One of the things that I kind of thought to console myself was like, oh, that's kind of cool, we'll have like a guest engineer every season. But now I'm like, I don't want to just like lose Pelia after this season. I hope she's gonna be
Right.
on like for a couple of seasons now. And then folks are still wondering when Scotty's going to come in. But see, yeah, Robbie, to your point, it's like there's so much that Strange New Worlds, I guess, has the potential to tell. And this episode made me really. It's funny. Strange New Worlds makes me think of Discovery a lot because I think this is so funny, but I think if they had just made Discovery a little bit more familiar, it would never have had to gone into the 32nd century. That being said, I'm so happy that Disco found the 32nd century because I love the 32nd century. I love like the landscape of the distant future. That's kind of an exciting thing that Star Trek hasn't done in a while because we have iPads and we have all these things. So the technology on Star Trek doesn't seem like as far-fetched to us, but programmable matter, that's wild. That's something we don't have, like things like that. So all right, so back on track here. So their mission, it turns out, and they're going at sublight speed, is to check out the Kirkovians. Were either of you guys like suspicious about the name, and did you think that like there would be a more strong like reference to Captain Kirk, or do you think it was just like a coincidence, or what do you think?
Oh, I haven't even thought about it until you just now said it. Well,
Like,
I thought this was going to be like some reference. Somehow we're going to find out that this is like the Romulans that had gone off. I mean, I was completely shocked when it turned out to be way more of a science fiction thing and not something just related to Vulcan lore and Star Trek lore.
right.
So, I mean, again, I was totally wrong, and I often am totally wrong about my predictions on these shows. But yeah, like where did these people go and what happened to them? I was like, oh, I know where they go. Again, I was wrong. But no, I didn't even think about Kirkovians until you just now said something about it.
I just thought it was a fun reference from the writers.
Yeah, I figured that too. But like I'm like, and that like one of them was blue and one of them was yellow. That's two
Yeah.
of the division colors. If someone had said red, if we had met red, I guess no one created a security breach. But if someone had done like a security breach, maybe a red would show up and would sound exactly like the other ones and just be like, you are in violation. You will be held for questioning or something like that,
Maybe. Maybe.
I just thought it was interesting, and it just I get excited about things like that though because I am a big Kirk fan. Like growing up, like Spock was cool and everything like that, and he was my imaginary friend. But it's because I always pretended I was Captain Kirk. So as a kid, like I really loved Captain Kirk and like tried to be like him. My father and mother remind me of Sarek and Amanda though, because my father was very strict and when I was like younger and stuff like that into my teenage years. But once I became 18, he just started becoming my pal, which is pretty cool. Like he let go of the dad persona and he was just like, okay, now you're 18, you can do whatever you want. I trust you. He was still my guide and parent, but he no longer had to resort to being a stern individual. But he reminded me a lot of Sarek when I was young. And I would just pretend, I guess Spock being I'm just analyzing this, but Spock being my imaginary friend might have been like my creation that helped me deal with my dad's strictness, just like Sarek's. Wow. No, okay, whatever.
Did your dad shun you for years at a time?
We had like that kind of relationship, but he was also very friendly. Like our shunning wouldn't last for years. It would last for like hours or maybe a month at the most. So, but it felt like years, like those kinds of things felt like years. But he would be disappointed in my choice of friends early on because he had my parents were Pakistani, and not to be stereotypical, but they wanted me to be a lawyer or a doctor. And when they saw that I wasn't hanging out with lawyers and doctor types, they were not happy. So I ended up hanging out with like artists and like musicians and stuff like that. So
you basically like quit the Vulcan Science Academy route.
I did exactly. Exactly. But as Kirk.
Right.
So I never could relate to Spock personally because I always enjoyed being like, I personally feel like a person who is very in touch with my humanity. I like being human. I would not ever want to be a billionaire, for example. I thought I did once when I was like very young, and I thought, oh, it'd be cool to have unlimited funds to travel around the world and never,
Mhm.
never think twice. But now now I find it obscene.
Uh-huh.
But going back to the Kirkovians for a second, because we went off. See, it's a good thing to have notes. Jill in our audience was like, "Oh, you do the show better when you have notes," and you're like, "You're right, Jill. It's true. It's better when I have like a structure to it, because I could just go on tangents." But go back to Kirkovians. I like that sci-fi aspect of it too, and I like the way that they were. I forget how they described it in the episode. Maybe one of you guys remember, but they had talked about how they had kind of like left this dimension, like they were like in another dimension,
Right.
and it reminded me of the animated. In fact, there were a lot of animated series references because I think they referenced Yesteryear with Amanda's memory, right? Like, wasn't that at the end of Yesteryear the kids come to ask? I forget. Like, it's been a while since I've seen it. Do you guys remember that episode of the animated series?
Oh yeah, I
Where
remember that.
Spock's running around with Ichaya, his pet, which is like a saber-tooth tiger,
Right.
tiger dog, Vulcan tiger dog. Anyways, I just like really liked that they referenced all these things that we've seen in the animated series. Modern Star Trek does a lot of good, referencing to the animated series, and so
Right.
yeah, it's good.
It was really
Did you
nice.
guys? Oh, go ahead, Robbie.
It was really nice the way that I would have loved, to be honest, like a whole episode of just Amanda and Spock. That could have been brilliant. This was still a great episode, but the stuff we got with Amanda, um, some of it was comedic, but also her kind of support of Spock, and Spock kind of realizing that she's gone through exactly the same stuff as he has as a mother of a Vulcan, and of course it's got to be difficult for her because she's supportive of Spock, but she's got this husband who she deeply loves, who is so closed off and is just not on speaking terms with Spock. And I hope we develop the Sarek aspect to that as well, because that would be a missed opportunity. But that's a highly relatable story for a lot of people. A lot of people don't get on with their mum and they draw closer to their dad, or the other way around.
There's a lot of opportunities to see Sarek, because Pike knows Sarek from season 2, the events of season 2. So we know now, like in the show, they like Spock makes mention of the fact that he and his father are not on speaking terms. So seeing Sarek again doesn't have to involve Spock. Maybe Pike is going to go on a mission to Vulcan, or Una. That would be neat, like to have like Una interact, because there's not enough Una. Even like
Her
but it'd be
eyebrows
cool.
were so
By the way, I do want to say that, yeah, like in that one scene where it actually looked like she had Vulcan eyebrows. I want to say, by the way, I love that. Robbie, you were talking about how like you want more emphasis on the other characters. They got a lot of scenes in where the whole ensemble got to have like moments in this episode specifically. I'm not talking about overall, but like in this episode, like there was a scene where all the ladies were teaching Spock to be more Vulcan. There was the scene where they were in the lounge all laughing together. We had Dr. Mbenga, we had Nurse Chapel. So it was like the whole, and we had Pike, of course, and then we had, T'Pring. So they packed it in with a lot of performers in this episode, and everyone got a little bit of a moment. Like Uhura they had to decipher that. It felt like TNG, because there were like they had to decipher that like speaking device. I won't say what they thought it looked like on the salon last night, but it was a little bit rude, I guess.
Not PG-13.
Not PG-13, exactly. What are you thinking, Robbie? I see you consternating down there.
Well, they did technically all get moments, but they were all servicing Spock, and that's fine because it's a Spock episode. But I
Spock
would really,
Chapel.
yeah, well, one of my problems with DS9, we were just talking before the show about how it's me and Dan's favorite, is I love the Odo Kira relationship, but that it always focused on Odo. Odo and his struggle. And we never got an episode where we saw Kira's point of view. And I feel like that is what we're getting with Spock. And that's okay because Spock's the main character. But even if we had like a scene or two where we kind of saw it from, I suppose we did kind of see it from Chapel's point of view a wee bit, but we're still not really seeing it from T'Pring's angle. And I think that's a very easy kind of trap to fall into. Or at least give us other characters who have their own episodes. I'd love to see a Chapel episode that was not centered around Spock, just for a change.
I
Or
agree with that. The more I think about it, this episode was like an hour long, and it really did have a lot of extra stuff because they were able to cram in just a little bit more than you usually would get. Like usually they're like 40 some odd minutes, so this was like 59 or something like that. And they even had they even managed to like give us that moment where Chapel was interviewing for the Vulcan internship or whatever it was, like, and then later on she has that triumphant moment where she just kind of hangs up on the guy. Like that was kind of nice, and
That was
that
awesome.
was a good thing
he
that they
looked
were
like
doing.
a Vulcan emo, the guy on the screen.
Right.
With
His hair was
yeah.
Who that actor reminded me of? Do you remember the guy in the 2009 film who was like harassing Spock? It felt like that same look, kind of. Maybe I have to look it up, but what if it was the same actor? I don't think it is, but
I don't know.
He'd certainly be older by now. 2009 was like how many years ago was that now?
14?
A long time ago. Don't make me do math.
Long time ago.
14 years ago.
You had said something about Amanda, and I thought like one of the best things about what's the actress's name? Kirshner, I think.
Mia Kirshner.
Is it Mia Kirshner? Right. She plays Amanda in such a good way that, like, before her, we didn't really have too much exposure with Amanda. Like, we had her in Journey to Babel, which was great. And then she was in Star Trek 4 after that, right?
She was in Star Trek 4 for like the first, 10 minutes.
And then that was it for a long time. And then you had Winona Ryder kind of flesh out Amanda a little bit more with those sweet scenes as they're going through Spock's life in the beginning. And even though it's in another timeline, you kind of feel like, well, it's kind of like what it would have been like. And so with Mia Kirshner's Amanda, we're seeing like what everyone would call the prime timeline Amanda Spock relationship. And I love it, as a, on a personal level, as like a mama's boy. I love how good he is to her, and like how he like defended her at the end. Like that was so great when at the end T'Pril approves and even like gives him that awful kind of backhanded compliment about like, despite your handicap, you've proven that like you can do this. And he's like, oh yeah, there was not even a shred of Vulcan in me when I did all that. That was like a human lying to you.
Right. That was amazing.
I thought that was great.
There's something that he says about his mother. I took notes.
Has Dan frozen for you too, Robbie?
Yes.
Okay. No, Dan's frozen. Dan! He was going to say he took notes. While we wait for Dan to return.
I really feel like Amanda in this show, I can absolutely see her being the TOS version. Just the way she acts is very similar.
Especially in this episode, I feel like it ties it into their relationship. He's very tender with her, right? In TOS, like, if I'm recalling, I might be recalling with romanticized memory.
He's kind of closed off, I believe, in Journey to
Babel.
But
doesn't she break through to him? Maybe did Amanda come out again later? I don't remember TOS. Oh man, Dan's like frozen. At least he's not looking too weird in his freeze frame. Oh, there we
he's probably gonna come back through.
Yeah, he should come back, hopefully. I'm gonna text him through subspace here and just let him know. Oh, he goes, my internet. Come back whenever you can. Whenever.
But yeah, Amanda I believe Amanda on Journey to Babel shouts at him at one point. She's just at his quarters at the
Right.
door, and Spock is facing away, and he's very, very closed off. So to see Spock become human so that he can show the love is kind of adds more to that. Now he can show that before he's back to cold, logical Spock.
Hold on, Dan's texting that he's lost his internet. I told him come back whenever you can, and I said we're just talking about Spock and Amanda, and we'll catch you up.
Did you ever
Right.
think it was weird that in TNG, Sarek is with another woman?
Oh, Perrin, yeah, I think we talked extensively. I hated Perrin so much. I was,
Did
but
the
they
actress
couldn't do it.
die, maybe, and that's why they
No,
picked?
it wouldn't have made sense for Amanda to be alive
Oh, right, of course. I wasn't thinking
in
about that.
TNG. So he remarried. He couldn't, but he. It was interesting because Sarek, he really has a type because Perrin's human too, right? So it's like, man, like he's really got something for humans. But and then we don't know, but could Perrin have had a child of Sarek as well? Is there another? Oh, here we go. Cool, we got Dan back. Welcome back. We can't hear you though. Oh,
I
now we
was
can hear you.
I
There
was
you
gonna
are.
say I was gonna say something so profound, and you missed it. I can't.
You said I took notes, and then you said I took notes too, and then you froze, and then
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, what I was gonna say about Amanda, there's a moment where Spock says, she showed compassion, resilience, and strength. I mean, those are the words that you use to describe Amanda. And we're used to thinking of like Vulcans are like superior to humans, right? They're stronger, they're smarter, obviously they're more logical. We think being more logical or being more rational is a strength. It's like makes Vulcans superior because humans are just filled with such chaotic, emotions that we can't control, and we're used to seeing that as a weakness. But and it's something T'Pol first raises this in an Enterprise episode when she's having to kind of defend humanity and to say, well, they have this compassion. They have this compassion that Vulcans so clearly lack. And so I thought that was a really amazing point about Amanda. He gave her strengths. And in the end, what you realize there's a moment back to the facial expressions thing. There's a moment where T'Pol says something about his handicap or his disability or things that he couldn't control, and it's a continuation of that sort of criticism, that wonderful thing of Spock, you are a disappointment, and you can see where it's one of those things like Amanda is a disappointment, and Amanda said she doesn't say that explicitly. She's talking about your disability, your handicap, whatever, and you can see Amanda's facial expression change very subtly, and she says, "Thank you, T'Pol." It's just amazing, and you realize Amanda's entire life is like being on that couch where people are constantly saying, "You're a disappointment."
right.
Her entire life is people looking down at her
It's
and
very
thinking,
difficult to love a Vulcan. She says it at the end, and
"Yeah, yeah,
it's true. It's like
That goes two ways
yeah."
to Spock and to Sarek.
yeah,
Because so frequently they don't
yeah.
see our positive points, the benefits of humanity. They don't see it. They just see it all as weakness.
They're Vulcans in the original series. You get a suggestion of this, but you definitely get it. They're like I would say they're like speciest or racist
Mhm.
against
Yeah,
humanity, like humans
right,
specifically. They
right.
they really like are kind of awful. And I guess Enterprise puts more nuance on it uh, because there are like actual clashes, of like
Mhm,
like this whole idea that the Vulcans were at once like controlling the pace at which humanity could
mhm.
advance, and humanity
Yeah,
was like, we're ready, we're already like we're like that was the big struggle. And I like that. That's one of the things that I really like about Enterprise is like we do have a more complete picture of like the Vulcan past. Like they even go into
mhm,
Surak and all that stuff. It's really cool. That's one of the things that Enterprise did really well. In this episode, speaking of Vulcans, I really love all the Vulcan ritual stuff. Like one of my favorite episodes of Discovery is Unification 3, when they have the
Oh yeah,
Tikal and Ket ceremony, and like,
yeah.
you know, of course we have the famous original series, you know, the speaking of T'Pring, like in Amok Time,
Mhm.
the famous ritual there, you know. What else do we see? We see Spock doing stuff in Star Trek 6 with Valeris, which now I'm like starting to like really agree with people that are like it was like an inappropriate relationship that he had with
Yeah.
Valeris. Like,
Well, and
yes.
certainly in that moment, and certainly in that
But I
moment, it was
also like
appropriate.
that's the other thing that came to light about Spock in this episode, but that like reminded me is like just like Kirk, there's like a pop culture kind of version of Spock that like people remember more. Spock is
Mhm,
actually quite
mhm,
a flawed character and like has never
mhm,
been like, you know, yeah, he has these great moments and he does adhere to logic and he is like don't get me wrong, he's the best of humanity, and like I think he's a great example of like what can happen if,
mm,
you know, Vulcans and humans like actually like maybe, you know, were more friendly with each other and like, you know,
mhm,
integrated more and stuff like that.
mhm,
Um, but you know, he definitely makes his mistakes, you know, along the way. And this
mhm,
episode reminded me of that because there were a lot of times where I didn't really agree with Spock in this episode, where I was just kind of like, oh yeah, you're like, you know, like especially when the way he handled his human emotions. Oh, and I found that interesting. I think it's interesting to note that Spock, you know, now has a frame of reference because that human emotions are in fact different from Vulcan emotions, because
mhm,
he says that to La'an in that scene about like you know, Vulcans have learned to suppress their emotions and they're very intense, but human
mhm.
emotions are very different, is what he says. So that's
Yeah.
interesting to know that humans have a different way of feeling.
Mhm. I loved in this episode how we get this thing in the beginning of the episode where he meets with Pike, and Pike is helping him, you know, with his cooking thing, and he's just very wooden while they're going through that. There's another moment where he's with these people in the lounge and they're all laughing hysterically, and he says, "Fascinating." And then there's this great scene where he's in this conference room with other science officers, and he does that whole thing of like picking up picking up Kirk's plate and his
I loved
cup.
all
He's
that.
obviously extremely irritated about it, but then the way that he handles it is just like, oh, he just has to go up and pick it up and take it away, as some of us might if we're kind of just a little bit OCD. And then when we see the human version of Spock, and just completely different reactions to all of these
But I
three.
love that they showed the same exact
Exactly,
scenarios
exactly.
in both versions. It worked really
Yeah.
well for me. What did you guys like realize it?
I feel like it made a lot of sense because
Mhm,
he's experiencing these Vulcan emotions which are stronger, so of course he's laughing ridiculously when it
mhm,
becomes socially uncomfortable for the other people that are past the joke. And also about T'Pring, you were saying how T'Pring seems like the bad kind of character in TOS, but I feel like this we see Spock's loyalty and with Kirk, and that he's, you know, he apparently
Well,
he adheres
well,
to logic, but
To Starfleet in general too. Like right
yeah.
now, it's to his ship Enterprise and to Kirk. I mean, to sorry, Pike. He's, you know, very loyal to Pike and stuff like that. And you definitely see that like Spock favors duty over the relationship.
Yeah, so it's interesting that we're seeing the more flawed aspect of him here because I'd actually say that the behavior that he's showcasing towards Chapel in this episode was um he is definitely the bad guy at this point in my books. And whether he's seeing that or not,
What do you mean by
I
the
feel
behavior he's showing? Or like when he
well he's getting together with Chapel while he's still in a relationship with the Pring just
do you
because
think
they've
no,
had a
but
falling out.
like Robbie though, like they're taking a break from their
But a
relationship.
break is not an
they were
end.
on a break. They were on a break.
I've always interpreted, especially when you're engaged with someone, that that's like almost like calling off the engagement. Like they're like kind of like we need to go figure each other out. And I don't know. I hear what you're saying, and that's actually something that's another thing that's a huge buzz on the interwebs is folks are talking about that. So I get your perspective. So I don't, but to me personally, like I also understand I mean, I love those like, kind of love stories like those, I guess those like, love triangle type of stories. So it's exciting to me
And
personally.
Corby,
Like I think,
I love it too.
I
I
I
love
feel
it
well,
too.
like
I think this,
Chapel
this
and
is
Spock
gonna.
are
I
gonna
think
get on, but
my
Corby's
my
gonna ruin
prediction.
it.
Yeah, well, my prediction is that like I think I think my prediction is that at some point Roger Corby is going to come in. I hope he comes in this season. I have no idea, but I really hope we see Roger Corby. I don't know who could play him, but I would love that. They already mentioned him in this episode. Like Dr. Mbenga asks Chapel, "What are Corby's 3 laws of like archaeological
Mhm.
medicine or something like that?" And she knows them or whatever. So I think he's going to come into the situation and he's going to see. I think we're going to see a side of Spock that we haven't seen before. My prediction is that maybe Spock will make a big mistake with Chapel, and Corby will be there when it happens, and
Mhm.
kind of like gives Spock like a what's up, like a little bit of a dressing down or something like that, and maybe that's why they're kind of distant with each other in TOS, Chapel and Spock, because Spock's trying to respect the fact that she chose Corby over him, because she was engaged to Corby and she's looking for him in
Mhm.
TOS. Like that's the whole reason she joined Starfleet officially. Because right now she's just like some kind of like provisional, you know, Starfleet member. She's not a part of Starfleet. She's not a commissioned officer. In other
Mhm.
words, like she
Mm.
belongs to it. Remember in season 1, I forget what it is exactly the terminology, but she's not an official Starfleet
She's like a
officer.
civilian. I
Something,
feel like,
yeah.
yeah.
Some kind of civilian liaison or something like that.
Yeah, yeah, I remember that. I remember that. That's a really
And
great.
apparently, what's that?
I was just gonna say that's a really great prediction. I mean, you've got it kind of you've got a good complex thought on that. I hadn't thought that far ahead.
Well,
I feel
I'm
like
always
Spock's
trying to
gonna
think of how they're going to connect it to TOS. So
Hmm.
it's like, what were you going to say, Robbie?
I feel like Spock's gonna make some mistake. You know, Chapel has been so kind towards Spock about how he can't really reciprocate her feelings in a lot of ways. You know, even back in Spock Amok, um, Chapel is saying you have to put to Pring first, even though that's hurting her to say that. Um, but I feel like he's gonna make some mistake that's down to him not being able to showcase his feelings, where Corby is gonna be able to kind of be a warmer presence, and that's gonna just tip the bucket for Chapel, and she's gonna realize it's never gonna really work
Yeah.
with Spock.
And then it's so brilliant and horrifying that Corby becomes an android like later.
Yeah.
And he's just a monster too, by the way. It's like
Mhm.
kind of like one of those crazy things. It's like wild. Poor Chapel, her journey is nuts.
Mhm.
It's kind of like it's quite strange. Speaking of strange new. Very cool. Well, we're coming up upon the hour, but before we end, I just want to talk about the. Oh gosh, there's so much you could talk. Well, we'll go a little extra if we have to. But what did you guys think of the awareness ritual? That's actually something I wish humans practice a little bit more.
What?
I kind of, yeah, like I kind of vibed on it, not from like such a blunt perspective. I think that's, obviously the Vulcans are being like very blunt, but like I think it's good for friends to make other friends aware of like certain things. Like we could we could get into ruts or habits, and
Hmm.
sometimes they're not very good habits. And like that's what I think pals or friends are there for, to bring awareness. Like just to say
Mm.
like, Sohail, have you thought about how like you're
Shaving?
constantly shaving? Is that what
I'm
you?
just joking.
I mean, exactly. Robbie, thank you for bringing
No, that was
awareness.
a joke. I like
I'm
your
so
beard.
grateful. Yes, I have thought about shaving.
No, I like your beard. I was just joking.
Well, I was
Thank you.
gonna say, Robbie, have you thought about growing a beard? I mean,
That's
because
a good
it would
point.
be.
Uh,
Hmm.
he just froze. Oh, you froze for a second. Um, Robbie, have you started sprouting?
Yeah, but I
Oh,
prefer
cool.
to shave.
Yeah, yeah. I used to, I shaved every single day of my life till I turned 30, and then I had it felt full finally by the time
Like
I was,
Riker.
yeah, like Riker. Now I don't have any. Now I often grow a beard, but it's so hot here in the summer that you have to shave. You can't keep a long beard down in South Florida.
Mm.
Not in the summer. In the winter, it's all right, but not in the summer. But what did you guys think of Savette, to Pearl's husband? Personally, I thought he was
He just went with
Hilarious.
whatever his wife said.
Hilarious. Yeah. Yeah.
But I love how he was curious about everything and he really wanted to eat the food. He was so
Mhm.
hungry. I felt so bad for him.
Yeah.
And like Pike is brilliant in the episode. Like lots of folks are pointing out how great Anson Mount is, like without being the center of attention, he just kind of steals every scene that he's in. But that's
Yeah.
that's great. I like that about I love seeing Anson Mount and everything. But yeah, Savette was similar. I haven't seen it with my mom and sister yet, but I have a feeling when we watch it, they're going to be reminded of one of our uncles, who was exactly like Savette. And in fact, now that I'm thinking about it, like the aunt might have been personality-wise much like T'Pril, but more human.
Oh boy.
So
Boy. Yeah.
yeah,
No,
so
I
that
thought
kind of thing's
he was
always
great.
fun.
He was kind of just there for comic relief, but he was there when they had the Vulcan delicacy, and the mom says like, too twisty. Ah, yes, it is too twisty. And then at the end of the ceremony, he's like, I'll have some more of that. That was great. That was great. I can see.
I
that it
love
is-
all the food.
Yeah. Yeah, that was great.
It
Love the food.
it was weird looking too, in a cool way. Like there was like weird shapes to the food and stuff. I love that Pike likes to cook anything. Like he'll make Vulcan food. Like he's a true chef, I feel like. And I think that's
Mhm.
great that he has that. Cisco kind of had it, and then that was pretty much it, right? None of the other captains cook.
No, none of the other captains did.
It's kind of funny that T'Pril had a kind of T'Pring from Amok Time energy, and T'Pring
Mhm.
is the one that was kind of going against her mother, but she kind of turns out that way later on.
Mhm.
Well, she's very loyal to Spock, and she defends Spock a lot. Like I've noticed that T'Pring, like almost in every instance that she's been on the show, there's a point where she tries really hard to empathize with Spock's dilemma, if you will, or
Mhm.
his condition, and his struggles. And I really like her. That's the other thing. It's like you do see a person who, T'Pril's becomes so much more interesting, than like
Mhm.
she was just kind of like like she was just like a footnote, on Spock's journey before.
Yeah.
It's like, oh yeah, Spock was engaged, and you had to
Yeah.
call off the engagement and blah blah blah, whatever. And Kirk is his true love, but
Caught that. We caught that.
I snuck that in there.
That's why you want to be Kirk. Okay.
Oh, the other thing I want to say, just to focus a little bit more on Chapel, because we have been talking a lot. I mean, I feel like there's enough of her story as well. I do like that, like this ties into episode 1. Remember when Spock like kind of basically stole the Enterprise to go and save La'an, and in
Mhm.
this episode, I love that, because like in that episode they have this shot like where they're all like kind of together, and I think Chapel says
Mhm.
something like, cool, like yeah, like this is good or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And I like how she was appealing to Uhura and Ortega's in this episode, and basically doing the same thing that Spock had done in that episode.
Mhm.
Like we have a friend, our fellow crew member, who's in need, and like there was a ticking time bomb, and I love that it was sciencey, like it was based on science. Like if the
Mhm.
longer Spock was human, the more his genome would solidify, and it would be
Right.
irreversible at some point.
Right.
So they had a ticking time bomb, which is great. And I loved, and I felt the tension. I was like, oh my gosh, like how are they going to wrap this up? Like,
Right.
what are I knew that Spock had to return to normal at some point, so like the stakes were false, but still I felt it for a little while. Like I was a little nervous. So
Yeah.
pretty cool.
Well, this is a constant theme of Star Trek, and it's one of the things that we come back to again and again. Is the friendship, the loyalty to your friends. How far are you willing to take that? Stealing a ship, that's come up a couple other times, right?
Yeah.
Stealing the Enterprise, stealing a shuttle.
I like that I like that the kind of ticking aspect made Chapel say what she really felt like saying,
Yeah, that
because
too.
a lot
Yeah.
of the time we're too scared to say this kind of stuff. It emphasized the friendship as well as our feelings of love.
Mm-hmm.
It was a beautiful kind of scene too, very well performed. I loved again, I loved Ortega. I mean, even Ortega's got like that cool moment where Chapel's like, it's up to us. We got to do this. And then Ortega's is like, so I'm going to be the one that says no to a crazy
Mm-hmm.
maneuver, right? And
Right.
then it's like, no way, we're all in, and I love
Yeah.
that. Like there's like a lot of cool Star Trek, like what you were saying, friendship, but also showing camaraderie and like, I always
Mm-hmm.
like to say with the Next Generation, it's even more. My style is casual and informal, so I'm more like I think Next Generation. I think Next Generation's more of a chill, casual, informal. We're like on a gigantic cruise ship, not like a war
Right.
vessel or anything like
Right.
that. That kind of thing. But TOS is a really great show that kind of like romanticizes the military in a way. Like I could see how people would want to serve in the Navy, for example. It would be a lot
Mm-hmm.
like that. And I think to me, Strange New Worlds captures that vibe as well. It does a good job of showing this as like a kind of like a naval experience. Like we know that Starfleet is much more than just a defense force. It's like an exploratory. Oh, and that's the other thing is like that's what they're always doing. Everything like you said earlier, I think it was Dan or Robbie, but about like there's a lot of science fiction stuff. Like they were
Mm-hmm.
excited about the anomaly. Like they were like figuring
Right.
stuff out. Like the Kirkovians, they were very curious about them. They even said that Kirkovian medicine was fabled to be like really advanced. So like they might even and they in fact like the fact that they can repair a dead person, put them back together,
Right.
even incorrectly, is like an extraordinary ability that
Mm-hmm.
humans don't. Sorry, anyone in the Milky Way galaxy doesn't seem to have easily at
Right.
their possession.
Right.
So I still think that they're related to Kirk somehow. I don't know. I have like a weird
Krovians.
suspicion.
You're probably right. You're probably right. We'll
Like
see.
they're in the Vulcan system. It makes sense. Kirk would like totally do something like that to be like near, like to counteract any like weird stuff that like now that they've introduced all this temporal stuff, maybe the Kirkovians protect Vulcan from what Nero did. Uh, in the Kelvin timeline, maybe that's what the Kirkovians do. They're kind of like protectors of Vulcan.
Mm.
Or they have to put them back together and make him look like William Shatner.
Yeah.
Exactly. I don't know. That's just my headcanon, of course, my suspicion.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I guess, is there anything we haven't talked about in the episode?
Yeah, I have a couple more notes, and again, like I'm not
Oh, cool.
a huge Voyager fan, but there's a couple of episodes. I think there's a callback. There's an episode from Voyager season 1, episode 14, which is called Faces, which is the B'Elanna episode where B'Elanna is like forced to kind of split into her two sides of
Oh
Klingon and
yeah.
human. And I mean, it's a very similar kind of vibe here, except there's not a Vulcan Spock and a human Spock at the same time. There's just the human Spock, and he's forced to deal with that. But in a way, he is forced to confront his Vulcanness with this whole thing of T'Pring and T'Pring and their family, and having to do this ceremony when he's not Vulcan anymore. So I think it's a similar kind of episode, and I hate to bring this up. I hate to bring this up. You're never going to want to ask me on your show ever again. So hell, when I say there's an element of Tuvix in this as well. There's an element of Tuvix. And the great thing about Tuvix is when Tuvix says, "But I don't want to die. I like myself just the way I am." And in this episode, again, it's the opposite of putting Spock back to the way he is. At one point, Chapel says, you turned him into something that he's not. And in some ways, this person that he is now is better at understanding my feelings. This person is actually better at some things. Again, going back to that thing about, are Vulcans better than humans? The Spock that's a human is in some ways better than the Spock that's a Vulcan, but he's not himself. He's not Spock anymore. So that's my final thought on that.
That's really that's totally true. And I think that like by the way, you could talk about I don't know if Dan's frozen again. Oh, there you are. You're back. You can talk about Tuvix all you want. Just know that on this show, we take the stance that Janeway did nothing wrong and that Tuvix was an abomination uh, and needed to die. Otherwise, it would have been the end of all sentient life in the universe, not just the galaxy. So Janeway made the best decision you could possibly make as far as we're concerned on this show.
Okay. I want to talk to you about that sometime. I think she made the right decision too. I think she made the right decision too, but I don't know that I would say the entire universe would have fallen into chaos if she made a different decision. And I hate to bring it up. Yeah, and I hate.
You guys, they prevented like genocide on massive scales by putting Neelix and Tuvok back to separate, because Tuvix as a being was the antichrist of like the galaxy.
Okay.
We witnessed Janeway like do the right. I don't know. I'm being over the top on purpose. No, but I do think that like in all seriousness, like that like yeah, it is the opposite, interestingly, of Tuvix, because in that episode, Tuvix in many ways was the amalgamation of these two personalities, and in a way could have been better. We didn't get to like spend a lot of time, with Tuvix. We only saw Tuvix, poor thing, pleading for their life. Like, like, it was really sad.
Right.
but we do realize that like, he can't exist even if he's better, at the sacrifice of these two individuals that had their own personalities and their own destinies and all that stuff. And in this episode, Spock can't exist without the two parts that make him, what it is, and that's his Vulcan side and his human side as one. And like, what's interesting is there's a lot of like, and I'm not going to speak about it because I did my, like, I grew up knowing that like, both my parents are from the Indian subcontinent, from the, so they're like, I'm not a multiracial person. I'm only Indian. Like, so I can't really comment on this, but I understand why Spock would be so appealing to someone who is multiracial as a character, and why it could be kind of harmful, the idea of splitting, that apart. But I think that overall we see, I like stories like this personally, because I think it's important to see like what the current perspective is on that idea of like, what does it mean to be multiracial? Even I think that changes over time as well. Like today, there have been times throughout human history where, multiracial people were looked upon as exotic and attractive, and there are times where they've been looked at, fetishized even, and then there are times where it's been looked at as like a bad thing. So there's a lot of baggage that comes with being multiracial. But the fact of the matter is that and it's a good and a positive thing, is that most humans are multiracial, and that's the direction we're going in. And so I think the universe should be multispecial. Like, that's the other thing that I love about Star Trek Discovery, is that you see the president is multiracial or special. I don't know how you would define it in the future, but we'll just say multiracial for simplicity's sake. She's part human, part Cardassian, and part Bajoran. So like, that's really cool. Those are her cultural and racial amalgamations and stuff like that. I am multicultural though, so I do like that. I do have that to relate to. But in a lot of ways, Spock grapples with that as well, because Vulcan culture and human culture are extremely different, as well. Like there's like a natural kind of like headbutting that occurs, because Vulcans are considered so like stiff and humans are considered so wild, so it's interesting. My closing thought, I guess, to add, to that, thanks for bringing that up, but I went on this long tangent, but I guess my closing thought is that I like that I like Pike's sentiment, where he says to Spock, like, well, let me introduce you to one more human ritual, which is commiseration. And I think that's such a wonderful note for, to end that kind of, episode. Well, it ends on, it's not easy, being a human who loves Vulcan, but it kind of like ties all into, together, which I like. So yeah, I think this episode for me is a solid 10. It's another home run type of episode for Strange New Worlds, and I look forward to hearing what you think, Robbie.
I have two final things to say. I feel like
Sure.
often, well, sometimes when we have a friendship or we're in love, it's to satisfy ourselves, without even really realizing it. It's for entertainment or the experience that we get out of it rather than the other person. So to see Chapel put Spock as he is forwards, even though it doesn't um, kind of satisfy her that he's not in touch with his feelings. That was really strong of her. Um, and secondly, I feel like it's kind of interesting that the Vulcans claim to be so inclusive when they're so racist against humans, but
Mm.
Enterprise kind of fixes that because um, I believe it's Saval that says, um, we're so critical of humans because you remind us of our uglier selves when we were warring and horrible. And I suppose if Vulcan emotions are heightened, then so too is bigotry uh, going to be heightened in some form for certain Vulcans.
Mm.
Oh, and I'd probably rate it um, an 8.5.
Oh, nice. And Dan, what was your rating if you wanted to give one, or do you want to
Um,
forgo?
I guess I'd give it like a 9.5. If we're giving it
Wow,
a
it's higher.
0.5 and stuff, I mean, yeah, I loved this episode. I thought it was
Wow.
hilarious. I thought it was dramatic. I thought there was great sci-fi stuff. Um, I kind of respectfully disagree with Robbie in talking about the character stuff. I think the show does a pretty good job of giving the characters their moments. I find myself each week when I'm watching the show, I find myself each week I have a new favorite character. Like that tomorrow episode. I was like, oh, Law's my new favorite character. The week before I was like, oh, I love Una, and this week my new favorite character is Chapel. I mean,
I
honestly, I'm
love
just like
that. That's cool.
every single week I'm just like, oh wow, that character is so great. The whole stuff with Chapel and like she was with the aliens and why what's their connection to this character, or sorry, to this person? He's my friend, and it
Right.
just goes farther and farther, and we know that it's just so much more than that. The bit with Chapel and Spock at the end, I mean, they sort of stretching the canon and stretching the overall story, and how this all. I'm with you, Sohail, that I love kind of how this precedes TOS. I love how it connects to the animated series. I love how it connects to Enterprise and Discovery. And I mean, to me, the big thing in Star Trek right now is the connection and how it all fits together. We're talking about, should it be an episodic? It should be an episode, or should it be part of a series long arc? No, I think the real question is, how does it all fit together? And it's just kind of this giant algorithm. And so to me, this episode just really fit, and it really hit all the notes. It was firing all this on this all cylinders. Excuse me.
Cylinders, yeah.
Yes, I got tangled up with stem bolts there for a second. Anyway, yeah, I mean,
Self-healing.
it just hit all the right notes for me, and all the, I you know I'm watching this comedy episode and I'm like, well, I'm not going to get emotional about this comedy episode. I mean, but in the end, it's like, wow, I got really emotional about it, and it was a great fun episode. I loved it.
I think it's interesting, like Akiva Goldsman, he's like a really prolific you know, writer and showrunner.
Mhm. Mhm.
Uh, like someone, I forget, I think it was on Strange New Pod or on Tech Trek, was just pointing out his laurels, like, just like his achievements. And uh but you can really tell he loves this era of Star Trek because
Mhm.
whatever controversial things that are occurring, in the fandom aside, he really, I feel, he, not just him but the whole team working on Strange New Worlds, Bill Wilkoff, like all the writers. I think the Benson sisters might write for the show. There's like a bunch of folks, but I think they're all so tuned in to TOS. Like that's what I just feel like. I think that, like, so I think we were on a conversation on Twitter where you were just like, oh yeah, this is, and I feel like our friend Ken, I'm not going to say much more. But Ken, tends to, because Ken, I hope you're watching this, but Ken tends to like worry a lot about canon. But to me, like I think, like what you were saying with the connections, like Strange New Worlds has like really been doing something very intentional about like explaining not just what's going to connect this show, but like why this whole Discovery era, if you will, has got certain things that are curious that pop out, like that they've intentionally done different. And I think Strange New Worlds is doing a really good job of just giving you enough like information to say like, hang on, stay with us, watch what we're doing, like, and it's working for me. I don't know if it's working for everyone, but it's definitely working for me.
Did anyone notice the TOS style? But well, obviously the TOS style,
the jelly
um,
buttons, right?
and the Pike's kind of, I don't even know what you call it because it's got his desk, but also the conference table, but also in the sick bay, it cuts to it briefly. Chapel's going over the protein sequencers. There's like this wee white console with loads of TOS kind of style flashing buttons, and they've added more of that this season.
Yeah, and you see more of that popping up, right? Yeah, so I wouldn't be surprised if we see the Enterprise change slowly and like, over time or however they're going to do it. I'm just excited. I really trust these writers and I really enjoy the show, which is a shame that like we're not going to get a season 3 for a while, because they're going to have to stop and all that stuff. So, in the meantime, by the way, there's a show that Paramount already has in it. Maybe I'll stay subscribed if they announce that they're going to air season 2 of Star Trek Prodigy, which I think is exempt from the SAG protest and can actually like finish. They can actually complete it and air it if they wanted to, because I think all the voice stuff is done, if I'm not mistaken. So, well, anyways. Enough about that, guys. Thank you for joining me. We're at an hour and 16 minutes, and we try to keep it an hour, but we had a really fun discussion. Like we had a lot to talk about. I'm sure we could keep going for hours and hours because there's so many like as you said, Dan, like little moments of characters and things that we can just kind of tune into and deep dive into. But for that, you hopefully tuned in yesterday because this is airing on Saturday, even though it's being recorded before to Text Track, where they do a deep dive and do a slideshow and everything. We sometimes do slides on this show when we're live, but I haven't had a chance to prepare the slides in a while. But anyways, where can folks find you, Dan, on the internet? And do you have a YouTube channel or do you do any streaming or anything like that?
No, I don't have a YouTube channel. I don't stream. I am at Twitter. You can just search for Dan Smithwick and you'll be able to find me. I'm also at Daniel Smithwick, but instead of a K at the end, it's a 1. So Daniel Smithwick 1. I'm on Twitter. I'm all over that. And I look forward to seeing you on Twitter. And thank you both.
We interact like pretty much every day, I feel like.
Yeah, that's right.
So it's pretty cool. It's nice to finally meet you.
What's your Twitter user?
It's Daniel Smithwick, and instead it's SMITHWICK. And there's another Daniel Smithwick in Ireland who's like a millionaire. That's not me. But instead of a K at the end, it's a 1. And so, you can find me there at Twitter. I just want to say thank you so much, both of you, for having me on the show. It's been so much fun.
It has been fun.
So
you're welcome back anytime, Dan.
Okay. Well, thanks so much. Thanks so much.
And Robbie, where can folks find you?
You can find me at Earl Grey Trekkie on Twitter.
Very good. Now that I've been injected with my emotion suppressing, I can go back to being a Vulcan, guys. Thanks for indulging my human. All right, folks, live long and prosper.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Sahil. One thing, actually, my thing is Daniel Smithwick 4. I'm sorry. I don't even look at my own handle that often.
You made Robbie follow the wrong Daniel Smithwick.
Yes, I'm so
sorry.
This guy's wondering why this guy had no tweets.
Yeah, that's right. Oh my gosh. Okay. Sorry.
All right, audience. and you made our audience look. Can you imagine this other guy's gonna get like 10 follows, and then all of a sudden
Yeah.
unfollow,
Right.
and then it's like that's actually kind of funny. Anyways, live long and prosper, and we will see you guys next.